Well, hello, friends, and welcome to the show. It's just me hosting today, Adrienne Dumas, but I have a special guest with me today, and it is Shawn Kevin Jason. And interestingly, we are doing this show during the full moon energy, and we also just had a partial lunar eclipse, so there is a lot of energy, and I know many of you are probably feeling that. But Shawn and I will be talking about UFOs, angels, werewolves, and other interesting topics. So this is going to be a fun show. And before I bring Shawn on the air, let me tell you a little about him. And Shawn is a former MUFON field investigator and director of special projects. And Shawn has been researching the UFO phenomenon for nearly 20 years. And in addition, he was a contributing writer for the Colorado MUFON Journal. As an experiencer, he recently had his own UFO encounter story published in Kim Carlsbergs' latest book, The Art of Close Encounters. And I know many of our listeners have probably read that book. Shawn is also the columnist for the Tucson UFO Examiner, and I think you can go to examiner.com and you can find the UFOs in Tucson column to read his articles, and you can also visit him on Facebook at facebook.com/Tucson UFO Examiner. So I want to say hello to Shawn. Hello, Shawn.
Hello, Adrienne. How are you?
I'm doing really good. How are you?
Not too bad. Enjoying this fine Friday evening.
Yeah, is it starting to get hot in Tucson yet?
Oh, absolutely. A little too warm. Already ready for winter yet, and summer hasn't even got here yet.
I know. Yeah. It's like 10 degrees cooler where I am in Arizona, but I remember Tucson heat. It's very, very warm. So thanks for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and so just to get right into it, you are a ufologist, right? So maybe you can tell our listeners, what got you interested, first of all, in UFOs?
Well, my interest began as a child. Essentially, I had found a collection in my basement. Apparently, it had belonged to my father in his younger years. It was essentially a box full of paranormal books, be it Bermuda Triangle, UFOs, that type of deal. I was probably 12 years old at the time, and starting to read books and getting interested in reading. And when I discovered these books, I was amused and interested, and read all the books I could on the material, and it kind of just started off from there. Later on in my life, probably in my early 20s, I took it more serious and began to do some real research on the subject.
Yeah. So with besides the research, had you had any UFO encounters?
Well, pardon me. Actually, it took a few years. At first, I got interested, and I started reading about it and researching the subject. And at that time, I was primarily interested in the whole alien ET angle of the subject. And living in Las Vegas at the time, not too far from Area 51, which during the 90s, it was quite popular. So I would make frequent trips out to Area 51, and on one occasion I did happen to see a UFO. I've actually had a few encounters or sightings, but there was one really good one that kind of just stuck with me. But certainly I've seen a few of them.
Yeah, that's really interesting about Area 51, and I mean, people are still, fairly interested. So you saw a UFO in that area?
Yeah, it was my main encounter, which is Kim Carlsbergs. It was Area essentially, late one night, I was at work, and to really get into the story, through most of my childhood, or at least my late childhood and my teens, I had developed this gift, I can only call it precognition. And typically the way it worked is I would get some kind of impression or a gut feeling, typically the way it was, tell me to do this or do that, and if I did such a thing, it always came true. In this case, I was at work, and I immediately got the impression that I needed to go out to Area 51. And the only reason I ever even made a drive out there was, in hopes of seeing a UFO. So when I was given that impression or that understanding, it was pretty much with the knowledge that some type of sighting or encounter would follow if I, made the trip out there. So I did. I probably didn't get out there for another hour till after I felt that, and it eventually led to a close encounter with a 20 feet as on Area 51.
Can you repeat that last part because you were cutting out slightly? You describing the craft?
Sorry. Yeah, it was a black triangle, and it was hovering just over the freeway, about 20 feet. I had stopped and parked the car just under it. The size of the craft was probably, say, roughly much less like a F-117 fighter. It wasn't too much bigger than that. And perfect triangle, a three-sided pyramid on the top, or a tetrahedron. The underside had 9 lights in the delta formation, and it was right in your face. You couldn't miss it. One of those deals. So it certainly left a strong impression on me. One I'll certainly never forget.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. And now you have a Facebook page about Black Triangle UFO disclosure, right? And this is it? I'm guessing this is based upon your encounter and your experience, right?
Correct. The URL is facebook.com/Black Triangle Disclosure. And essentially it's just a collection of either sighting reports, news articles, recent articles, pictures, and things of that nature, strictly devoted to mainly Black Triangle UFO sightings. And you can just check that out on Facebook.
Yeah. Do you feel that craft was ET?
I mean, to go into more detail, I had 9 lights craft. Posing to look at the light bulbs, and they were incandescent, which is just a Thomas Edison invention, nothing alien at all, or ET. The idea being that recently Congress has essentially outlawed the incandescent light bulb in 2007, and they plan on phasing these bulbs out simply because they're not energy efficient. And most incandescent bulbs, you waste more energy that's converted into heat rather than light, where we have more efficient light bulbs, like, say, the fluorescent, which you get more light out of it than it produces in heat. So if this were truly an extraterrestrial craft, and we have to believe that their technology is more advanced than ours, that they can travel so far and reach our planet, and yet they can't invent, a better light bulb, it simply doesn't make any logical sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. That's very interesting, but it's interesting, too, that you felt drawn to that area, like you knew you were going to have this sighting.
And that's something I developed in my teens. I won't say developed, it just kind of happened on its own, and as I grew with it, I began to understand more or less how it works and how I used it in my life. During my teens, I kind of had a troubled childhood and some problems at home, problems at school, so I spent a lot of time on the streets, running around, getting into trouble, and the first thing I noticed was I had a knack for identifying cops or police officers in my presence before they were actually there, which kind of earned me the nickname Radar, because we'd often be going up and be like, by and it was just at first it was kind of just a coincidence. Just chalk it up as a coincidence, nothing more. But the ability that just grew with me, and it began appearing in other parts of my life. And that UFO encounter was one such situation.
Shawn, do you think you could actually hang up and call back in because your phone is cutting out? And Blog Talk Radio suggested that if this happens, to have the caller hang up and call back in. And I hate to do that during the show, but do you think you could do that?
Well, let me put you on speakerphone. Can you hear me a little bit better now?
I can hear you. It's like I can hear you, and then you start to cut out. So I'm not sure if it's a phone or if it's just Blog Talk Radio. But
okay. So let me call right back.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Okay, so we are going to have Shawn call back in. Blog Talk Radio has been acting kind of strange lately. I don't know what's going on with them, but very interesting. So when he comes back, we will continue talking about those topics. And people are in the chat room. And if you would like to listen in, you can call in at 760-539-3234. Hello, Shawn. Are you with us?
Yes. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. So hopefully it will keep working. We'll just try again here. So anyways, well, you and I have talked personally on Facebook, and we've shared some of our our strange experiences that we've had. And you had mentioned to me that you had an experience with a werewolf as well as with an angel. So I don't know, would you like to talk about those experiences with us?
Well, I guess experience or encounter may not be the right word. Certainly my understanding of what happened has changed over the years. When I was about 8 years old, I had what you would call as a false awakening. And most people are familiar with lucid dreaming, typical dreams, things like that. But most people haven't experienced, say, a false awakening. Essentially what it is where it's kind of like the opposite of sleepwalking, to where in the sleepwalk, your body is fully awake and functioning, but consciously you're out of it, you're unaware of what's going on. And a false awakening is kind of the opposite of that, to where your body is completely asleep, but your mind is fully awake. And that kind of situation is like reality as you experience it now. You're fully aware of yourself, of your surroundings, of time, of, everything going on. So in that situation, it was, I wouldn't say an encounter, but a really vivid dream, so to speak. Now,
that's interesting. So then, so there's a difference then between just dreaming and being awake in normal consciousness and having an encounter and then a false awakening, because I don't know, some of our listeners might have had similar experiences. So maybe you can kind of, just go into the false awakenings that you had.
Okay, well, dreams, you kind of have different levels of dreaming. You have just your regular unconscious dream, to where you might be having tea with Frankenstein or Godzilla, and it seems completely normal. You'll wake up and sure, that was a weird dream, but at the time it happened, you're kind of not really aware of yourself. You're just kind of going through the motions. The dream is just kind of happening to you rather than you're controlling the dream. And say a lucid dream is kind of where you're dreaming and then you suddenly become aware that, everything is not real, that it's a dream. And for a brief moment, you become aware. And a false awakening is typically where you wake up into the dream world and you don't realize you're dreaming. You think it's complete reality.
Mm-hmm.
So in that situation, when I had these encounters, it was waking up in the middle of the night. Pardon me. And in this first encounter, I essentially woke up in the bedroom with work. I immediately assumed a fetal position, which is rather odd for waking up and kind of jerked out of sleep into that position, as if you just woke up from a nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried drawing on what had just happened, but it was just a blank. I couldn't remember exactly what I dreamed about. And, being a young child, I was a little scared and trying to figure things out. The house was quiet. I figured I just had a bad dream. No big deal. So I just sat there for a while, collected my thoughts, collected myself, and decided I would get a drink of water. So I crawled out of my bed and began, get ready to exit the bedroom when I felt something in the room with me. And it was rather scary at first because it seemed like something was wrong or out of place. And I turned behind me, and I can see these lights out the bedroom window, which appeared just like two red lights in the backyard. And at first I was like, okay, what is that? What am I looking at? And the lights began getting closer to the bedroom window. And as they got closer, I realized it was some kind of figure or silhouette. And the lights were actually eyeballs. They were, blood red, which for a child was pretty scary.
Yes,
Until eventually,
I imagine. Even for an adult, that would, freak you out.
Yeah, that's true. So as it got to the window, I realized that it had the silhouette of what I, recognized as a werewolf at that age. And the lights from the eyes kind of glowed into the bedroom, glowed all over the curtains, and it's very bright eyeballs, almond-shaped, blood red. It was peering into the bedroom like it could see me through the curtains, and it knew I was there, even though the curtains were completely closed, and I couldn't really see any silhouette of it. So I stood there, tried not to move, tried not to make a noise, and eventually it moved on. So I thought, I'm safe now. Nothing to worry about. I'm ready to leave the bedroom and go away from my parents and kind of alert them to something in the backyard. And as soon as I turn around, I hear this crash. And this creature had just jumped through the window and into the room. And at that point, I was ready to scream. I was, scared to death. It totally seemed completely real. But I knew something wasn't right, and it eventually walked up to me until it was ready to basically bite me, at which point I essentially woke up back into the same fetal position I was just in. And I realized it was just some kind of, weird experience.
Mhm. Yeah, that's very strange. It's very interesting, though. And, werewolves are, hugely popular right now, But it's at the same time, if people really met a werewolf, how would they feel? So, I don't know. That's very interesting. So was that your only experience with the werewolf?
No, that was my first experience with the werewolf and with a false awakening, or what I come to understood as a false awakening. And again, with the false awakening, it's just like reality. It's very vivid, very real. You experience the dream second by second, minute by minute, breath by breath. There's no difference between reality and a false awakening, other than, of course, a false awakening is not real in terms of, a physical reality like the one we're in now. But as far as consciousness goes, you're completely awake and aware of your surroundings, whereas a dream is rather fuzzy, and like I said, you can be having dinner with Frankenstein, and it might seem normal, but this was on a different level.
So, have you ever had an experience or an encounter with any type of being, like paranormal or whatever, that wasn't a false awakening? I know I've had, and I've talked about this on our shows before, experiences with seeing angels and fairies and things like that, but to me, I was fully conscious, some of those experiences were in the middle of the day, So I'm wondering, have you had any experiences like that before?
I've experienced a few ghost encounters and things of that nature, but outside of the false awakenings, I can't say that I have, unless I simply don't remember, or, I at least have no conscious memory of the experience. For the false awakenings, after having numerous UFO encounters, your first reaction is, what if they were, maybe some type of UFO abduction, alien abduction type of deal that you simply don't remember it, or you remember it differently than how it really happened. So I kind of began looking back at some of these experiences and questioning maybe what really happened other than what I remembered as it, happened or occurred.
So maybe some beings were being a little tricky with you, or maybe it's our own minds will see certain or have memories of certain things, but will remember it differently.
Yeah, kind of like many UFO or alien abductions, to where they have, say, false memories of the abduction, to where one said, one situation happens, but they've been kind of given another impression of what happened at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of what I thought may have happened, and why I was taking another look at some of these situations or encounters.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And you had also seen an angel?
Correct. It was the same situation as the werewolf encounter. It was another false awakening. But at this point in my life, this was around when I was getting past my troubled teens and going through all that. I wasn't very happy with myself and my position and where I was in life, and I knew I can do a lot better than that. So I had really worked on myself to get out of that situation. And after I had done so, I had another false awakening where essentially I had met an angel to basically tell me she was more or less proud of my situation and coming over that.
Yeah, that's really powerful. So what did she look like?
It happened when I was coming home from school, and I was tired and decided I was going to take a nap. And got to my bedroom, shut the door, laid down. Next thing you know, I'm kind of jerked out of my sleep into a fetal position. And someone had left my bedroom door open, even though I had closed it. The hallway light was on, and there was a woman standing. She had long hair, curly. She had this deep glow about her. And she never spoke to me the whole time, although I could feel presence, feel her. And she was just letting me know she's all or under. Yes.
Can you just repeat that part again, because you cut out briefly? So she was glowing. That's the last thing I heard.
She was, she had this white aura glow about her, and she was more or less speaking to me telepathically or through her heart. She was just letting me know that she was kind of proud of me and my situation, what I had gone through and what I had overcome in my personal life, and was just letting me know that she had, been witness to it, and I guess you can say maybe she was a guardian angel or something to that effect, but it was a very pleasant experience as opposed to the other false awakenings with these werewolves or whatever they were.
Yeah. Huge difference.
Yes, definitely a huge difference. But she was like the epitome of perfection and beauty. She just, radiated beauty about her. And immediately following that, I again woke up into the fetal position, and the bedroom door was open, the hallway light was on, which was rather bizarre because the surroundings was exactly the same as it was in the dream, only, of course, there was no angel standing in the doorway this time. But even though she wasn't standing there, I could still kind of feel her presence there.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So it was a powerful experience at the time, and it certainly helped me get through some of the things I did, as a teenager.
Yeah, that is powerful and interesting that you could still feel that energy too for a while.
Now, the second encounter with the werewolf, I was probably 12 years old. It was about the time I started reading all those UFO books and everything and getting into that. And it more or less happened the same as the first one. With all the false awakenings, it seems the common theme is you're jerked out of your sleep into a fetal position, which was rather unusual. And you wake up, and of course your surroundings seem completely real. You don't realize it's a dream at all. It seems like perfect reality. And in this case, I left the bedroom and went down to the kitchen to get a drink of water, and the creature came up from the basement, and kind of like before, it just gradually approached me until it seemed like it was about to attack me. And I woke up into actual reality, again into a fetal position.
Mhm. Wow. That's very interesting. So you had mentioned to me briefly before on Facebook that you mentioned something about the death process, and that's really intrigued me. And I'm wondering what you meant by that, and did you have a near-death experience?
I would call it a past life recall of a previous death from a previous life. It was kind of like the false awakenings, to where it feels completely real, as real as reality gets. There was little difference as far as the experience goes, because your awareness or consciousness goes. In this case, it started off where I was floating in an ocean. There was a large ship next to me, and there was a lot of men in the water. The water was on fire. I presume it was some type of oil slick or whatever, because the ship was breaking in half. The water was on fire, and there was just a bunch of men screaming and yelling. Everyone was drowning around me. And based on, the style of clothes they were wearing in the ship, men about me, it seemed like it was probably around maybe the 30s or 40s, something like that. And I'm swimming there. I seemed to be a heavy-set older man, typical fisherman garb, or garb like that. And I tried swimming for a while, to the best of my ability. But eventually, it just overcomes you. You just can't keep yourself afloat any longer. So as I begin to sink underwater, you hold your breath as long as you can until you just can't hold it any longer, and the water just rushes right into your lungs, and you take a good mouthful of it, and it's your last breath, and excuse me. So as I take my last breath, consciousness just begins to fade out. Everything goes black, and it was rather a scary experience from feeling it completely fully aware, fully conscious, every second of it. And it's like your consciousness retreats into your mind or your head, and you feel your body dying. Mm-hmm. And as it does that, you get this little trickle of energy, this little spark right around your solar plexus. And it starts off small at first, and it gradually grows, and until it kind of the best way I can compare it would probably be to an orgasm. The electrical body, so to speak. You feel like you have this electrical body or this bubble about you. And as the energy gets stronger and stronger and stronger, you hear this distinct pop. And at the moment you hear this pop, it's like you've exited your body. And the moment that happened, I again felt like I had a body. I could see everything around me. I could hear. I could do all that. But the only difference was I could look around and see all the other men who were drowning around me. And everyone essentially had these rainbow-like, colorful bodies, astral
really?
bodies. As they're all, scrambling to get to the surface of the water, probably unaware that they had already died, but still thinking they're alive.
Wow.
So it was a rather interesting experience, especially for how real it felt, being fully aware, fully conscious of what was going on.
So do you think that was like a past life memory?
Well, as a child, one of the things I was always interested in was someday growing up and being captain of my own boat, and I always had a love for the ocean and a love for ships. And although I had a deep-seated fear of drowning, which scared the hell out of me, so it's entirely possible that I may have recalled a past life death.
Yeah, so how did this come to you? How did you experience this in this life?
Well, again, it was kind of like one of those false awakening type dreams. But again, it wasn't a dream, because dream is kind of the wrong word for these experiences. Typically when you say dream, you think of these crazy, fuzzy type of things, or you half remember it in the morning when you wake up, where this type of experience, you remember second by second. And the whole thing just seems completely like everyday life.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do believe very much in past lives and the continuation of consciousness and, that sort of thing. But it's very interesting that you have that experience without putting any real effort into trying to remember, a past life, because people go to hypnotists and things like that to try and remember their past lives and understand why they might have certain fears or phobias and that sort of thing. So very interesting that you just had like a memory, or it was just within you and you just totally remembered without any real effort.
Yeah, it was quite surprising for me. I certainly wasn't expecting it, but when it happened, it kind of clicked for me, and a few things started making sense as far as my childhood and my love of ships, and someday dreaming to be a captain, or yet my deep-seated fear of drowning. Of course, I don't know anything about this ship. I presume the way it broke up, it was possibly hit by some type of torpedo or something like that. So maybe this was during time of World War II or leading up to it.
Wow.
But again, it's pure speculation without really knowing any details further than that.
Mhm. Yeah. So we have a question from the chat room. Would you like to take one of those questions?
Sure.
Okay, so Wayne in the chat room was asking, do you have any juicy stories from being an investigator?
Well, let's see. I'm sure most people are probably familiar with Gary Buchanan, the UFO hacker, who allegedly had, hacked his way into NASA and the Department of Defense. And as he did so, he found a bunch of different things. One of those was the story about non-terrestrial officers, or ship-to-ship, fleet-to-fleet transfers. Now, Gary was speculating that maybe the Navy has some type of spaceships something of that nature, to where these officers would be classified non-terrestrial. From my research, it is entirely possible that Gary had indeed found those things, and these things do exist. And when I say do exist, I mean there have been various sightings of rectangle UFOs, aircraft, essentially, that are probably black budget aircraft and not necessarily extraterrestrial UFOs. Mm-hmm. One such craft would be, whether or not it's the correct name, I coin it as a senior citizen, and it's a rectangle black craft that's larger than a football field, 2 stories tall, and it's been witnessed by numerous people over the past several decades. This craft has been classified as a transport ship, kind of like a C-130. A C-130 is used to transport troops, tanks, jeeps, trucks, pretty much anything you can fit on it. And that's what we used in wartime, or just period, to transport stuff. This, however, is probably not used in that same respect, as far as we wouldn't be using these craft to, waste money transporting Humvees or tanks or anything like that. My research has led me to believe that these are possibly flying aircraft carriers. Mm-hmm. And they possibly have numerous, of these craft basically flying around our atmosphere, acting as floating aircraft carriers. One story that ties into this would be Robert Dean, who's a fellow UFO researcher here in Tucson. Back in, I believe it was 2008, he had done an interview with Project Camelot. And during that interview, he had given a few names for these ships that supposedly goes back to Gary McKinnon through Timothy Good. Apparently back when Gary had hacked into these computers, he passed on this information to Timothy Good. And as the story goes, these Brits who had access to that information had approached Robert Dean in Spain. And Robert Dean says that 2 of these names were the USS LeMay and the USS Hillenkotter, or I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name right, Hillenkotter. Now, USS is typically a United States ship. It's theorized the USS is United States spaceship.
Wow.
For the USS LeMay, USS LeMay and the USS Hillenkotter, based on the names they use for aircraft carriers are typically named after either political figures or admirals, Navy admirals, which Hillenkotter was an admiral, and LeMay was the vice president running mate with George Wallace in 1968. So it's entirely possible these 2 names are actually spaceship aircraft carriers, so to speak. Kind of like what some people theorize as motherships. You have the mothership, and then you have the little smaller UFOs that come in and out of these guys. Basically, that's an aircraft carrier or a flying aircraft carrier.
Wow, yeah. What do you think about orbs that people see? Because my boyfriend has this theory that they might be like our own military, like watching us.
Well, that's entirely possible. And certainly the man-made UFO technology goes all the way back to World War II and probably before then. The Nazis were certainly working on it. If people are familiar with the work of Nick Cook and his book, The Hunt for Zero Point, he certainly showed that they at least had an interest in it, and they had even done some building of, experimental UFOs as we might see them. But absolutely, you can say that some UFOs are ours, and as in my situation with the Black Triangle, it was a man-made UFO pretending to be aliens.
That's very
for whatever
strange,
reason,
isn't it?
Absolutely, and it's certainly unethical and illegal on so many levels, because in many cases these black triangles actually go out of the way to harass the witnesses, so much as following these people home, harassing them on the highways, doing a number of things to scare people, even though
really?
they're not ET at all. Yes, yes.
I've never heard about people crashing from seeing these crafts. That's very interesting. So we do have another question from the chat room, and Marissa, she says, does Shawn think that ETs are going to eventually make themselves known to all people on Earth?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
She asked, do you think that ETs are going to eventually make themselves known to all people on Earth?
I would certainly hope so. That would be nice. Whether or not they actually plan to do that or will do that, I do not know. But my impression is that there may be some type of ET contact or something to that effect, but it may not necessarily be a good one.
Yeah, so you're actually writing a book, right?
Correct. Kind of the working title right now is essentially The Coming Alien Invasion. Not necessarily real aliens, but I'm speaking more of a false flag operation.
Oh, I see. Very interesting. And yeah, like people are talking about that's definitely a possibility.
Well, when you think about, say, my encounter or other encounters like it, we already have man-made UFOs, which are pretending to be ET, and subjecting people to close encounters to give people the impression that ETs flying around our skies and abducting people on highways, which that may very well be the case. But as far as the black triangles go, it certainly doesn't seem to be happening like that. Maybe they're just trying to spread or help people kind of stay interested in it, or keep the rumors going, keep the talk going. At least give the impression that they're not man-made by the way they operate, which was the same findings that the NIDS Foundation, for National Institute for Discovery Science out of Las Vegas, under Robert Bigelow, had come to that conclusion. That at first they thought these craft were man-made and possibly Department of Defense aircraft, but based on the way they were operating, they eventually changed their mind and decided these are possibly ET craft, because if they were man-made, they certainly wouldn't be doing what they're doing.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So we do have a couple more questions, and someone in the chat room was saying, what does Shawn think about what Stephen Greer is doing, and that he's, definitely in the news right now because he just put out the Sirius movie. So what are some of your thoughts about what he's doing, his work?
Well, I remember him, of course, from the 2001 Disclosure Project, and I have nothing but respect for his work, and certainly he's done a lot for the community and for disclosure. As far as his recent efforts go, certainly, he's on the right track. As far as the alien body goes, I guess that remains to be seen. But certainly, it's very interesting. This is not the kind of the alien autopsy junk that we had to deal with in the 90s, and that whole charade around that bit. But we're talking about a little mini alien, basically, that lived from 6 to 8 years. Whether or not it's truly an extraterrestrial from another planet or something that lived here on this planet, things like that, I guess, remain to be seen. But I certainly hope it goes far.
Yeah, and it's interesting with the little being, which, you know, we still don't know exactly what it is, but I guess from their research it did live to be 6 to 8 years old. And if people haven't seen it, you can just Google Sirius, the movie, I guess, and you know, you'll see at least a clip about the little being that they found. And I have this book called The Field Guide to Extraterrestrials, and it's by Patrick Huey, I think is how you say his name. But in it, there was a woman she was in England, actually, and she saw a little ET being that was like a fairy, except it was more of like a mechanical little gray being, somewhat similar to what Greer is showing, but with this little being, it was like had these magnetic hands and feet. So who knows? I mean, there could be just a wide variety of beings visiting our planet.
Well, absolutely. I don't think it would just be like one species. If if the universe is abundant with life, then it's quite possible we have numerous different species visiting the planet. And certainly, going by the various witness reports over the decades from people who have said they've met them or seen them, they've described all types of beings that allegedly have come here. So I would say there would probably be a number of different ones.
Mhm. Yeah, so that's why I never, you know, when this first came out with Greer and this little being, some people were like, well, that's ridiculous. It's so tiny, but it's, you know, it's like, well, how do you know there aren't beings from other planets or dimensions that are just tiny, you know, compared to us? And we could be tiny compared to other beings, so we don't know. The universe is vast. But we do have another question, and someone in the chat room is saying, has Shawn ever encountered the spinning fireball like UFOs, or have you heard of, you know, stories about this? If so, what do you think about them?
I can't say that I have encountered anything like that, and as far as what I think of them, you know, it's hard to say. When you say spinning fire, it could be actual fire, or it could be some kind of plasma field around the craft. Certainly that's been reported numerous times, and a lot of these UFO crafts have some type of colored plasma field or something to that effect. It seems an aura about the craft. So whether or not it's alien, whether or not it's man-made, it is really hard to say.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of different types of UFOs and things, strange things that people have seen for sure. So, Shawn, was there anything else that you wanted to share with our listeners?
Well, I mean, certainly we can cover a lot of different things from different aspects of either the paranormal, UFOs, and how those things intermingle with one another.
Yeah, I remember you had written to me about having experiences with a ghost in your, like you lived in a haunted house, right?
Yeah, I was actually out in the Black Forest in Colorado, out east of Colorado Springs. The particular home wasn't too far from where a ghost town, or what was left of a ghost town, used to exist. So whether or not these experiences were from something that was left over from that time or something more recent is hard to say. And then just to my family as well, my father, growing up with various stories, he had different ghost experiences, so I kind of grew up with that, was used to that. So when we moved into this house, we began to experience a number of different things. For example, my oldest son, who was quite young at that time, right around the age of 5, had an invisible friend with a name and he could fully describe this kid that he played with all the time. And it wasn't too long after he started playing with this invisible friend, we began to experience weird things about the house, things going on. One particular night, the wife and I were asleep. It was early morning hours. We slept with the bedroom door shut, and kids slept in their room shut with the door shut as well. And we were awakened to a kid crying at the door, and we thought it was one of our sons. And he kept crying and crying and crying, and we were confused because both of the boys at the time knew fully well how to open a door. And we figured maybe he was just scared and just had a bad dream or something like that, and for whatever reason just could not figure out how to open the bedroom door. We're yelling at him, just open the door, come on in, open the door. And the crying continued. It just would not open the door. It just stayed there crying. So I finally crawled out of bed, go to the door, and open up the door to let him in, let him into the bedroom so he can crawl into bed. And the second I opened the door, the crying stops. So I'm thinking, okay, he's happy now. I open the door, he's going to crawl into bed with us at any moment as I get back into bed with the wife. And I'm waiting and waiting. We're both waiting, and no kid shows up. I'm like, okay, well, where did he go? So I leave the bedroom, and I go check on their bedroom. Their bedroom door was shut, open the door, and both of my boys are in bed, sound asleep, undisturbed, as if they had never left their bedroom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we were really kind of bugged at that point because there was no evidence that he had even left his bedroom or even was awake, but obviously something was crying at the door. Another situation was when I was working on my computer late one night, and everyone was in the family room. It was a kind of like a basement apartment in this house, and everything was closed off. I had a bunch of doors that essentially closed off the hallway, closed off the stairway. So as I'm sitting there working, everyone comes running out of the living room like a bomb had just went off, and they're all freaking out, screaming, yelling, like something horrible is just happening there. And I'm trying to figure out what's going on because from my side, my perspective, everything was quite calm, quiet. So I'm just working on a computer, and they were like, "Oh my God, did you hear that? Did you hear that? What happened?" I'm like trying to figure out what happened, and they're telling me essentially it was like the room exploded, like something was just tearing down the living room door, just ready to get into that room and get at them. And from my side, because I was essentially on the other side of that door they were talking about, just a few feet from it, nothing at all. It was completely quiet, completely calm. There was no noise. But for them, they swore that door was about to just break down at any moment.
Yeah, that kind of sounds like residual haunting.
It was certainly something, some kind of haunting. And there was another situation where I was home alone one day, and everyone was out of the house, and I was walking through the living room, and about halfway through the living room, there's suddenly just a bolt of electricity that just shoots out of the wall by about 5 feet, and then it makes a 90-degree curve, 90-degree turn, and just shoots straight down into the ground. And the lightning, is just electric blue bolt of lightning, very straight, very narrow, not like when you think of a lightning bolt, the way it's all jagged and whatnot as it comes down out of the sky and hits the ground. This was, it was a straight line coming out and going straight down into the ground. And when that happened, I was given this impression that, here I am. This is where I'm buried. If you dig here, you'll find me, kind of deal. Immediately when that happened, I freaked out. I ran the hell out of the house we lived on. Yeah. It's a 10-acre lot. So I ran to the furthest corner of this 10-acre lot, and I just was not going to go back in the house for the life of me. Eventually, of course, I did go back in the house, and when I did, there were no scorch marks or anything like that on the outlet, no scorch marks or burning or anything on the ground. It was like nothing ever happened. But certainly, I saw it, I felt it, I heard it. It was rather unusual.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's some kind of strange energy, like literally some kind of an energy. Yeah, I lived in a haunted house too. Well, I don't know so much that it was the house that was haunted. It felt more like the area in general. So like there would, like spirits moving through almost, which is very strange. But and I remember that my dad's sister, because we had lived at my grandmother's house at one point in time, and this was the house that the area that was haunted, but my dad had grown up there, and his sister had seen a spinning like orb of light right in the center of the bedroom with an eyeball on the top of it.
Now that would be quite frightening.
Yeah, so I mean, and there were weird things like when we had lived there, my sister and her friends were watching television together, and they literally saw the cord to the TV come out of the socket and then drop to the floor.
Wow, yeah, that would certainly send chills up your spine.
Yeah, so it's very strange, and it's even stranger to me because I've had a lot of experiences in my life, but when I lived in that house, everyone else had experiences. I didn't have any experiences. There were a few times that I was creeped out, just got like a creeped out feeling, but I never actually had anything happen to me there, which is very interesting. Another experience is my sister. We were all, because we were playing softball and my brothers were playing baseball, and we would all go at the same time in the car together. And my sister forgot her softball glove, so she ran back into the house alone. And she said when she went into the bedroom, or she was going into the bedroom, the door would not open, like someone was pulling it back and forth. And she finally let go, and the door swung open, and no one was there.
Yikes.
Yeah, so it's like definitely I think that, and the whole, like, ghost phenomenon, I think it's more important than people realize because, I mean, that that means consciousness continues to exist on some level.
Well, certainly I believe so, and based on my own personal experiences through my life, I've seen enough to convince me that there is absolutely life after death. So, in some respects, that's given me some peace of mind that, most people fear death, and it's probably one of their biggest fears, but my own experience has told me not to fear it, at least from what I've gone through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Certainly the past life recall of death and going through that whole thing and ghost encounters and other things of that nature have helped with that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, very interesting. So we have another question, and they are asking, do you think that with shifts happening on the planet that more things like ghost encounters will become more common? So, yeah, like, what are your thoughts about these experiences that people are having? Like, do you think that this is becoming either more people are just talking about it more openly and sharing experiences, or do you think that it's actually happening more to people?
I don't know if necessarily it's happening more. I would say certainly more people are open to it today than they were much longer ago. It was kind of more taboo in the past, where it's becoming more accepted and more people are open to other possibilities these days, or at least a broader understanding of what reality is and how it works.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say, there's maybe some shift or anything like that which is causing it or making it happen. Certainly in the case of UFO encounters, particularly man-made ones, where there's one, there's going to be others, and if they have, fleets of these craft, then, obviously a lot of people are going to be seeing these. Not necessarily all of them are going to be reported. I know as we've talked about, say in the 60s, typically maybe 1 out of 13 people would report their UFO sighting, and that was only because back then the Air Force officially investigated UFOs under Project Blue Book before it was closed down by the Condon Report in 1969. Today, however, the number is probably a lot bigger, whereas most people are unaware of if you have a UFO encounter, where do you report it to, or even should you report it. So you might be looking at maybe 1 out of, say, 25 to 30 people who may actually bother to report their encounter, and it could even be higher than that because most people will simply not report it.
Yeah, so where do, for people listening, because I'm pretty sure our listeners, they might have, future experience, where would they go and report?
Well, if you have a UFO encounter and you want to report it, the best place to do it, or one of them, is MUFON.com, MUFON.com. And you can simply do it online and do it anonymously if you wish. You don't have to give up any personal information. But that's always helpful if they want to investigate the case more. And you never know, there may be other witnesses who also saw the same craft around the same time, so you can corroborate 2 witness reports together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because when I was younger, my first UFO sighting, I didn't know, I was a kid at the time, so we didn't report it. My parents didn't report it, but I didn't know that our entire neighborhood had witnessed the UFO, and sadly, most of them were retired people who have passed on now. But my parents told me, through the years, someone would bring it up, and then we'd be like, hey, you saw it too, so nobody really wanted to mention it, after it happened, but through the years, people just found out, oh, yeah, we saw the same thing, so it's very interesting.
A lot of people are scared of ridicule, and they don't want to be made fun of, and, you think that just because you saw a UFO, people are going to call you crazy or think you're really out there, and that's usually far from the case, and there are plenty of scientists, military personnel, presidents even, who have seen UFOs. Reagan, Jimmy Carter, all kinds of people see UFOs. So, in my situation, being a researcher and investigator, and I don't hide the fact that I'm into this and that I researched this, and you'd be surprised at the number of people that simply come up to you and say, hey, I saw a UFO, and I've never told anyone about this, but I know you'll listen to me, and you'll try to help me out to at least understand what it is I saw, because you obviously have an interest in it, and you're not afraid to hide it.
Mhm. Yes, that's what we're about too. With UFOs and people having experiences with angels and fairies and all different kinds of beings and spiritual experiences, and that's part of our purpose too, is to help people to not be afraid to open up and talk about this, because I think it's hugely important. Especially for humanity's consciousness, that we acknowledge that these things really happen to people and not just laugh about it.
Absolutely. And it pretty much deals with everything, even when you get into the whole psychic abilities and things of that nature, as begin to understand more of how reality works and things of that nature. We can see that these things do exist, such as, my psychic ability, precognition, which there's on the precognition thing, there's actually a good article or a paper put out by John Taylor in the Journal of Scientific Exploration. It's on the volume total number 3. And it's called precognition. And essentially what they're theorizing is that precognition is only basically access to a future memory based on quantum mechanics, to where there is no past, present, and future, but everything is right now. So if you think of precognition, typically it was like people would think of it as you're accessing some kind of library out there and beyond. It has everything that's going to happen, and you're basically tapping into this information, and that's how you're accumulating all this knowledge from events that have yet to happen. Whereas this is more theorizing based on quantum mechanics, that time is like an event is like a rock dropping into a still pond, and those ripples kind of go out in every direction from that event. And your present day self is accessing a future memory within yourself. It's kind of on that same wavelength, which from my own experience I can certainly say it's a lot like that. And I've had a number of different situations, like I mentioned, as my childhood, they called me radar or my UFO encounter. Typically it dealt with me personally, my own future. However, when I had kids, my ability kind of like jumped out to my daughter, who I was very much attached to, and I could also kind of see her future, although typically it was a future of hers that interacted with my own. So there's a number of situations where I could see something bad happening to her, and because it was bad, because I was so concerned about her safety, I would be able to tap into this event before it happened. There was one case where she fell down a flight of stairs. Now, when she first started crawling and walking, we had a very steep and narrow staircase, and I was always concerned that she would fall down these stairs. So anytime I knew she was going to go up the stairs or down the stairs, I would stop whatever I was doing to follow her either up or down to make sure she didn't fall. And if she did, I was right there to catch her. But it wasn't like I would just carry her up the stairs, because I still wanted her to learn how to navigate the stairs and do it herself. I was just there as, a fallback in case she did fall. And the whole time she navigated the stairs, she did so like a champ until I felt confident she really didn't need me there by her side just to make sure she didn't fall. Until one day I'm working on the computer and I was overcome with, again, one of these strong precognition visions that she is about to fall down the stairs. So immediately I run to the staircase, and there she is going up the stairs. And I followed her, expecting her to kind of just lose her balance and fall at any moment, and I would be there to catch her. So she navigates all the way up to the stairs, gets all the way up to the top, and I'm dazed and confused at this point, because up to that point, it had always been 100% right. Anytime I got this feeling, it was never wrong. So I was just standing there kind of trying to figure out, well, how was it wrong this time? Why did she not fall? And as I'm standing there thinking, my wife basically starts yelling and screaming at me and pointing at something. I really had no knowledge what she was even saying. It just sounded like just a bunch of screaming and yelling. I look in the direction she's pointing, and I see my daughter come rolling at me down the stairs. And by the time I see her, I drop my hands down, and she just rolls right into my arms.
Wow.
So it happened a lot like that.
Wow.
There was another situation, and this was after the whole, radar episode, when, I straightened out my life and, changed everything and became a better person in my own eyes. I had joined a softball team, and I was playing softball with my brother and a bunch of friends at the youth center on Ellis Air Force Base. And we were playing a game, and while I'm sitting on the bench in the dugout, I was overcome with the strong impression that I'm basically going to I'm going to hit a line drive that's going to essentially knock out the pitcher. And I was amused at one hand, and on the other hand, I was, rather confused, because this was the first time I had felt that same feeling outside of events that would earn me that nickname, radar. So my impression was, well, let's just tell everyone what's about to happen. So I began telling all my team players that watch this, I'm going to go take out the pitcher. I'm going to shotgun the pitcher. Watch this. So finally get up to bat. I get up there, and she pitches, and I just let the first one go by. She pitches again, and I just feel it. And I just put everything I have into this ball, swing it, hit it, line drive, right into her chest. Just line drive straight into her chest, and she just falls down to the ground. And she's not moving. And I start running for first base, and I get halfway there, and she's still laying on the ground, not moving. And at this point, everyone is essentially standing up, freaking out, because I had no idea what happened to this girl. And I'm freaking out at this point because I think I just killed her. I'm worried, oh, my God, I just told everyone I'm going to do this to this girl, and now she's lying there not moving. And I certainly didn't intend to hurt her, but at the same time, I wanted people to, I wanted to show people to say, I can predict the future. Here's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it. And to do that in baseball, to say, not only am I going to hit the ball in this direction, but this is what's going to happen, it was rather bizarre. And I looked in the dugout, and I see all my team players on my team, and they're just kind of standing there, jaw hanging wide open, just staring in amazement, like, oh, my God, what did you just do? You just told us you're going to do this. And I'm trying to decide whether I should continue to first base or run to the pitcher's mound to see if she's still breathing or if she's okay. And eventually the coach runs out, her parents run out, a bunch of adults run out, and she had the wind knocked out of her, and she got her breath back, and she was all right. Just really shook up from the line drive that hit her, and she was okay after that. But it was rather bizarre. After that game, of course, though, she would never pitch another ball to me again, and I always got a free walk every time we played that team.
Yeah, I bet. That's very interesting, yeah. So you have these experiences a lot, or does this happen just randomly?
It's more or less, it's random. It's not random because it seems to manifest wherever I put my focus. So like in the situation with my daughter, my focus was to make sure nothing would happen to her, whatever it was, just to make sure she never harmed or hurt. So anytime there was a situation where she might get harmed or hurt, I seemed to be able to pick up on that. And again, I think it goes back to the whole idea of quantum mechanics, that there is no past, present, or future, that basically everything is happening right now. So with my daughter's case, it was any time there's type of injury or anything to her, I was accessing some future memory of my own where she was possibly hurt, and I was able to tune into that and pick up on it before it actually happened. Which again, it happened in one situation where she got her hand slammed in the car door, and I was able to see that prior to it happening, only to find out that I was the one who actually was responsible for causing it based on the perception happening. It was kind of like I'm outside having a cigarette, and I see my daughter, feel my daughter getting her hand slammed in the car door, specifically getting her hand slammed in our car door, yet she was nowhere outside at the time. Within a few minutes, she moseyed outside of the house because we were visiting a friend out in the countryside. She came outside, and my younger son was out by the car getting something out of the car and just kind of lingering around the car, which was way at the end of this long driveway. I didn't think anything of it at first, and eventually my daughter started moseying her way over to the car, and I began to think, okay, this is starting to happen, or starting to click with my preconception of what was about to happen. So I'm telling my son, get away from the car, shut the car doors, and he was so far down the driveway he couldn't even hear me. As my daughter starts, picking up speed, running to the car to see what he's doing out there. And I keep yelling at him, close the car doors, close the car doors. What, Dad? What, Dad? What, Dad? Finally, my daughter is actually at the car and coming around behind him, and I, scream at this point at the top of my lungs, close the car doors. And, of course, at that point, he heard me. And just when he goes to swing the car door shut, my daughter runs around and is about to jump into the back of the car when he slammed the door right on her hand. Of course, she's screaming and yelling and got her hand stuck in the door, so I had to run out there to open up the door to get her hand unstuck because the car door was locked on it. But again, it happened exactly like it did in my precognition. And in this case, it was it basically happened because I caused it. Had I not been yelling at my son to yell to, to shut the car door and the perfect timing of everything, she had never had her hand slammed in the door.
Wow, that's interesting. So, yeah, I don't know, that just brings up, like, timeline, like the idea of timelines, like you had seen a vision of, like, a possibility.
Well, exactly, and it kind of goes back to the idea of the chicken and the egg, which came first.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I remember my sister kind of has that ability a little. There have been a few instances in her life where she's had dreams and they have happened. But one instance where she wasn't dreaming was she was getting on an airplane and they were going to fly to Florida. They were going to Disney World, her and her class, and she kept feeling like there's something wrong with the plane. And she had this, like, I think she had like a vision of them like getting off the plane or something, and she's like, we got to get it. She was just like very nervous and like almost overwhelmed, and she's normally not like that, And everyone's like, oh, just calm down, you're just excited, and everything. And right before they were about to take off, they had to get off of the plane. There was something wrong with the plane. So she was like, I knew it, So it's just very, very interesting. So you've also had experiences with missing time, because I think I heard in the last interview that you did on another show that you mentioned something about having a missing time experience.
Yeah, actually, it was a Sunday morning, and my oldest son was really big on dinosaurs. And Disney had just come out with their new movie, Dinosaur, and he really wanted to see it, so I decided to take the boys out to go see it. And it was about, 10:45. The showing was at 11:15. Freeway had a half hour, which was enough time to make it to the theater. So we left, and during the entire ride there, I had this weird kind of oppressive feeling that I'm not allowed to see what time it is, even though there was a clock on the dashboard, that I just could not get myself to look at this clock for whatever reason. So I'm driving to the theater with this oppressive feeling that I'm just not allowed to know what time it is. And when we do make it to the theater and I go and I try to buy tickets for the 11:15 showing, she gives me just the most bizarre look, like I'm just crazy. And I asked her a few times until she finally spoke up and she said, well, the 11:15 showing started like over an hour ago, but if you hurry, you can still, make the 12:15 showing. And at that point, I was just dumbfounded.
Mm-hmm.
Because the trip should have maybe took, 20 minutes at most. But instead, it was over an hour to get there.
Wow. It's very interesting.
And, of course, we got into the movie, and my son just immediately cried the whole time, the one who really wanted to see the movie. And me, I was dazed and confused as to what happened and why it took us, over an hour to get there. We just left and we got home, and the wife was asking, well, how was the movie? How did it go? And I explained to her that we never got to see the movie. We had just got there not more than a few minutes ago and just left. And she was like, well, where have you been all this time? I had to explain what happened.
Yeah, that's very strange. Do you think, do you have any theories about this? I mean, what do you think that was about?
Typically,
Hello, Shawn?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you now. I couldn't hear you at all for a minute there.
Okay, sorry. Well, the theory is, most people think of missing time, they think of ET and abductions, and that was probably my first reaction was, we were possibly abducted, and that would explain why we lost an hour or more. Whether or not that really...
This is during the day, right? Like in the middle of the day?
This was just before noon on a, Sunday afternoon. So this was broad daylight going down the freeway in Colorado Springs. Eventually, though, my impression changed, and I hadn't wondered if maybe somehow I had influenced maybe time, the immediate time bubble around myself, and somehow sped up time myself. As crazy as that sounds, rather than
no, it doesn't sound crazy at all to me. Believe it or not. It's very I mean, to me, the idea of being abducted in the middle of the day and having that whole, that sounds a little crazier to me than the idea, the thought of time somehow warping or, that, I don't know, that just, go ahead.
That would be more of my perception, that somehow possibly I was able to warp time around myself and actually speed it up or something through this oppressive feeling that I wasn't even allowed to know what time it was, or at least that time for that moment didn't exist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think, of course, there are missing time experiences that people have that, probably are related to ETs and that sort of thing, but I don't know. I just don't really feel that every experience of missing time is people being abducted by aliens. That's just what I think. But someone in the chat room was saying, I drove home one time on a 2.5-hour trip, which took only 1.5 hours, and I drove at the speed limit. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know, it could just be some kind of, strange time experience that we just don't understand yet, and maybe these things happen to people sometimes.
Well, it's entirely possible, and we truly don't understand what consciousness is and what reality fully is yet, and there's probably a lot of things we do to influence it without being fully aware of it. It does take, precognition, for example, the ability to see future events before they actually happen. As I suggest, maybe you're just accessing a future memory. Now, there's a few experiments I did with myself to kind of try to figure things out with what's going on. I wanted to try to use it to, say, win money. In one example, I took my wife out, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to see what I can do with this and see if I can win some money doing it. So it kind of deals with the law of attraction and the way that works, if you're familiar with that. Or,
oh, yeah, we're familiar with it.
The secret. So we drove up to a gas station that sold, scratch tickets, and the way I would do it is, if you've ever won anything before, if you've ever won money before, the way it works is you draw it to yourself through attraction. And that's kind of how energy works. The world and everything works through energy. So the way you would attract it is I would basically drum up feelings of a previous win. Get really excited, like, oh my God, I just won all this money. And you just totally put yourself into that frame of mind like you just won. And there's no doubt about it. You have no doubts at all in your mind that it actually has already happened, even though you haven't actually experienced it yet. That it's a sure thing. It's already took place. And so I'd get there. I'd put myself through this routine, and then I would walk in, and I would look at the scratch ticket, and then I would fill the tickets. Basically, I would run my hands over the board, over the counter, and see which one felt right to me, which one felt like the winner. In this example, I bought one ticket and took it outside, scratched it, was a $50 winner. Like, all right, just won $50. Let's go to the next store, do it again. I'd put myself through the whole routine, like, oh my God, I just won all this money, get all excited, yahoo, kind of that put yourself through that whole thing, drum up all those old feelings of a previous win, go in, run my hand over the counter, and find that one winning ticket. And in that case, it was another $20. It was a $20 ticket. So like within, a matter of 20 minutes, I just won $70 just by putting myself in those shoes. And
wow.
I did that also in casinos. There's a way to do that in a casino is before you enter the casino, you would basically bring back a feeling of a previous win, get yourself really excited, don't let any doubt enter your mind, because the second you get any doubt, it pretty much ruins it. You have to be, 100% believe, 100% sure that it's going to happen for real. There's no doubt. So you would bring up all those feelings of a win, and then when you enter the casino, most people just, play a machine that they like or a favorite game or something like that, which I never played like that. I usually felt the machines. I would walk around and try to find a machine that drew my feelings, that I kind of could sense that it was the right machine. And by the age of 24, 25, I had managed to accumulate somewhere around 40 royal flushes, which
wow.
most people who may live in, say, Las Vegas their entire life may never hit one royal flush.
Oh
but
my gosh.
For me, after the age of 21, I had managed to hit something around 40 or more within a few years just by using techniques like that to try to fill out the machine on, matching your energy to the winning machine energy.
Wow, that's really a good tip for our listeners, And, yeah, we talk about, like, the law of attraction and manifesting a lot on our shows, and I've had a lot of experiences, but interestingly, I've never played the lottery, and I don't think I've ever even been to a casino, so that's something I'll have to try. Someone in the chat room was saying that I do that too, but doesn't work all the time. Yes, doubt would enter my mind most of the time. So, but that's cool. I mean, I totally believe in all of that.
Yeah, and certainly doubt will ruin it because, you have to 100% believe it, 100% be sure it's going to happen. Otherwise, even the slightest bit of doubt in you, and it may not even be doubt. It may be just you're sick, your energy isn't right, you're not feeling well, you're not really into it, or you're just getting greedy. Greed, too, will put a damper on it. So it's not something I would recommend doing all the time. But, certainly if you go play once in a blue moon, it's certainly worth a try. It's just, if you've ever won anything before, to put yourself in that frame of mind and go for it kind of deal.
Yeah, and that's fun, too. So we did have some other questions. This was in regards to the ghosts. Someone, Henry in the chat room, said, I have been grabbed twice as a child and later in my early teens in the middle of walking by an invisible force. It paralyzes me, and my mother called me and broke their spell twice, both times during an electrical storm. He says, I think they are extraterrestrials. And he says, what does Shawn think?
Well, I mean, it's entirely possible. We really don't have any true knowledge of what the ET is or how they would operate or how they would interact with us. Was it a decade ago, some inventor came out with that cloak, that invisibility cloak, essentially it makes you look visible. Now, our ETs, a lot more advanced than we are. Presumably, they can be completely invisible. That you wouldn't even know they're kind of like the whole Predator movie type of situation where you just see this weird, distorted kind of see-through, kind of bigger outline. So that's entirely possible, or it could have just been a ghost.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, and I think also maybe in some instances, like with experiences like that, or even with UFOs in our skies, we just might not be able to see them People talk about the veils between the worlds being thin at certain times, and then you can see certain things during those times, whatever that might mean. But I guess there's just a lot of possibilities there. I mean, like with angels, I can feel energies around me with angels and different kinds of spiritual beings. I definitely feel they are really there, but it's not like I see them around me all the time, But there's definitely lots of energies around us that I think we just can't, for whatever reasons, we just cannot see.
Well, that's entirely possible. And on that same note, there may be as well UFOs that we don't see, even though they could be flying right over us. Mm-hmm. And if we're already dealing with some type of invisibility technology, then it's not too far-fetched to use the same technology to make aircraft invisible.
Do you think that some ET crafts, like the crafts themselves, could be like actual beings?
There's been reports of things flying through the air that look humanoid, that are possibly shaped like some type of being or something like that. Whether or not the craft was the being is anyone's guess. I mean, it's entirely possible, I would suppose. But, anything, I suppose, is possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've wondered that, like, what if some of the crafts are actual beings themselves, and we just, or like the orbs, I don't know if you've seen I'm sure you've seen them, the videos of them, with NASA in space, and there are like these orbs, like, I wonder, are those really like crafts, as in physical crafts, or are they some, energies, or are they like beings? I don't know.
Well, it could be a number of things. It could be even something like ball lightning or a simple explanation like that. I mean, most UFOs have a simple explanation, and most can be identified. Really, it's only a small fraction of UFOs that actually remain unexplained. And even of those, it's an even smaller fraction that would likely be extraterrestrial, considering we don't know, just the depths or to what extent UFOs are man-made, and just how many are out there that are actually ours. So, it's entirely possible.
Yeah. Well, we have about 20 minutes left, so was there anything else you wanted to talk about, or take any more questions?
Well, I suppose I can probably touch upon the man-made aspect of these UFOs, as in
that would
my
be great.
encounter with the Black Triangle, and my suspicion or my belief that it was one of ours. But again, typically that raises the question of why they would be, doing that to people. Why would they be hovering these man-made UFOs over public highways just to frighten the hell out of people? Of course, if you follow, say, Carol Rosin and some of her work as far as this whole false flag operation that she discusses from Werner von Braun and the whole lineup of enemies supposedly the military-industrial complex wants to invent to build weapons and space-based weapons against. When you start looking at that, now that's entirely possible, because if we're in some respects, the alien invasion has already begun, because these UFOs, these man-made UFOs, are already out there pretending to be alien, already out there frightening people. And it wouldn't take too much, imagination to wonder what would happen if they, began some full-scale invasion with these aircraft or something to that effect. The way aircraft are going, they're already, don't have pilots, unmanned aerial vehicles.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Pretty much pilots just sit behind some computer monitor and remotely fly these aircraft. And in the future, it's entirely possible through artificial intelligence that, you may not even need a pilot. You can totally have computers completely operate aircraft with no human interaction at all. It's completely automated. And if we already have man-made aircraft that look completely alien, what's to stop them from building something that's based on artificial intelligence? You just enter in a simple command, and these aircraft do whatever it is you wish. And for most people, it's completely not us, it's extraterrestrial, and they would certainly believe that ET was attacking us or there was some type of threat from ET. Although the question is there really a threat from ET? As we discussed, there's possibly already abductions, and when you get into abductions, you have to ask whether or not it's right or wrong. If I walk into someone's house in the middle of the night and take someone from their bed and conduct some type of medical experiments on them and then return them, they would probably want to see me go to prison for the rest of my life because that would be illegal and unethical.
Yeah,
however,
that's true.
If the alien does it to them, it's a totally different experience, and they don't necessarily think of it as wrong, at least not all of them.
Yeah.
But again, if they're able to do things like that, should we be letting them do something like that? Should we be stopping them from doing those things? Are there already people building craft trying to stop them from doing such things? There's been long rumors that there's a secret alien UFO war going on, which it seems is entirely possible based on what they're trying to do and what they've accomplished so far, and other witness testimony to suggest there is some type of war, secret war going on, that we're basically at war with aliens already. Now, whether or not these, say, large rectangle UFOs or aircraft carriers, whether we have fleets of them flying up in our atmosphere, what are they being used for? Could they be used to, say, defend our planet from UFOs? Are they flying up there, filled with our own man-made UFOs and attacking ET as they enter our atmosphere? Who knows, but that could entirely be possible.
Yeah, or could there be different ETs fighting each other or something? I mean, I don't know, right?
So certainly not all of them would be hostile. As our own planet as an example, we have good countries, we have bad countries, we have friendlies and not so friendly people, so the same could go outside of our universe.
And then even in a country that we might consider to be, not so great, there's still good people, on every planet and in every, I would guess in every species too. And I was actually talking about this with some friends earlier today, that, the Greys get a really bad rap, but people have reported having benevolent experiences as well as not so great experiences with those beings, but it doesn't necessarily mean that all Greys are bad or good or whatever. It's like you were saying with different people. Not every person has the best intentions.
No, certainly, and when it comes to ET, we don't necessarily know what intentions or agenda they have, and those who work those projects may possibly have an idea, but of course that's not being shared with the general public. And that's really where the public should come in and has a right to know what's going on. Certainly, if they have some agenda or some plan to fake an alien threat or an alien invasion or something just to garner support for, maybe a world order or something to unite us against the aliens and go to war, if there is a threat, simply inform the people and make an educated, informed decision to go forward with that. I think most people would agree that, I don't want to be abducted in the middle of the night and used as some lab rat or something to that effect. No one would certainly want that, although, a nice, like in the 50s when it was the contactee movement, most people, you just, meet them out in the desert, go for a cruise around the solar system, here's this, here's that, here's the future, whatever. kind of deal, more of a friendly kind of face-to-face meeting where you're sharing knowledge as opposed to being experimented on.
Like Stranger at the Pentagon. I've been reading that book.
Yes, exactly. So
perhaps there are people from Venus or other planets visiting us. And, I mean, we don't really know. We can't say for a fact that they are or are not. But a lot, there are people that definitely have had. I've had my own experiences with ETs, but it's mostly in like the dream world or through meditation, and that's based, more upon my own spiritual beliefs. But I don't have any like proof, that that I'm communicating with them or anything like that, or that I've had experiences with them. And it's also not quite the same as UFO sightings, though I do feel they were possibly the same beings, because I've had different UFO sightings, and a couple of them, well, the first sighting I was frightened because I was a little kid and I didn't know what was going on. I mean, my parents were freaked out, seeing this huge craft. But then when I was older and I saw a fleet of UFOs, I had just pure, ecstatic, joyful energy. And that energy stayed around me for days after that sighting. And then I had another experience where I think I could have seen a craft that was landed. I mean, all I could see were these lights, but it was I was reading this book about grays, too, at the time, and my feeling was, those little buggers are going to try and come and get me, and I was freaked out. So it's like completely different feelings and experiences with each sighting. So who knows?
Well, in that same way, I've had numerous dreams where I've actually met grays or things of that nature, but I chalk it up as a dream, and I don't really give it much credit simply because of the way the dream occurred or happened. It was really your typical fuzzy, type of disjointed, whatever type of dream to where none of it made sense, but yet you can remember these entities or these beings being in your dreams, as opposed to, say, a false awakening where you meet a werewolf, you meet an angel, and it's as real as if one were to walk through the door right now as I'm talking to you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do wonder still about the dream, just normal dreaming, if these beings can communicate with us, because through the dream world, and maybe in some ways it might be easier for them to communicate with us in our unconscious states, because I've had many healing, very powerfully healing experiences in the dream world with angels and fairies and ETs too. And I going through a very stressful period, and then just having them, some being appear in my dream and get, the whole dream was definitely a dream, but it was also like encoded messages and encoded healings for me. So I do kind of wonder about that, if that's just another medium for them to sort of communicate with us.
I think so, and it's entirely possible, at least from my perspective. Maybe we're more open in that state of existence or awareness, and we can receive information a little easier than, say, in fully conscious reality that we are in now. Excuse me. So, I mean, who knows what the plan is as far as how they interact with us, or if they do, and why or how they would go about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's very interesting, and it's great that people can have conversations like this, and there are just a variety of people researching this topic, because, there needs to be a variety. There's so many different types of experiences that people are having, so it's very interesting times. So it looks like we have about 10 minutes left. So was there anything else you wanted to quickly share, like where can people find you again?
You can reach me at examiner.com, and if you just search usually Tucson UFO, you can usually find many of my articles there. Also, of course, on Facebook, facebook.com/Tucson UFO Examiner or Black Triangle Disclosure. And you can usually reach me through that site as well. As far as any more stories or anything like that, of course, I have all kinds of stories or information. Let's see, one I usually don't share would be about a man-made UFO that my ex-father-in-law told me about many years ago. He's actually a retired Air Force. Spent most of his time working out on a Tonopah test range on the F-117 stealth fighter, where he was a mechanic. So he was a very trustworthy person, at least enough that the government would put him in such a position to work on that aircraft before it was known to the public. And one day he relayed a story to me about his childhood and his father, who was an inventor. And this was probably around 1952, and it's and as he put it, it was one morning his father came out to show him his latest invention, which was essentially a disc, two saucers put together, saucer on top, saucer on the bottom, and a rim around the edge of this thing with what he described as a bunch of pistons. And when he said his father had turned it on, the thing began hovering over the kitchen table. And the pistons on this craft, this little miniature UFO, would pop out all at once and then gradually go back in, and then eventually pop out all at once and gradually go back in. And his father had basically built a little man-made UFO, as he put it. And it wasn't too long after that his father had passed away, and then the invention got lost. Family kind of helped himself to his family's or his father's collection and whatnot, mementos of him and whatnot. So it was something that he never got to see again, his father. So for me, that was kind of a confirmation that we can build them ourselves, and we probably have been doing so for a long time. If someone like his father could do it, then I can only imagine what other people might have accomplished.
Wow, yeah. That's very cool. That's very interesting too that he created a little saucer, and then now you are, a ufologist. I mean, that's kind of interesting.
Well, he definitely would tell me that, had he got to keep it, or had he inherited the little saucer invention that his father had built, it would eventually probably been passed on to me with my interest in this subject. Unfortunately, it wasn't, but it was certainly at least a cool story, if anything.
Yeah, that's very cool, and yes, definitely. Who knows? Oh, they probably have such amazing things that they're not letting us know about, So thanks, Shawn, for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, so again, you can find Shawn at theexaminer.com, and you can also find him on Facebook at, and that is what is your Black Triangle Disclosure?
It's facebook.com/Black Triangle Disclosure. Or you can also reach me at Tucson UFO Examiner.
Yeah, so check out those pages. They're really cool. So thanks, everyone, for listening in, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening.